Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting name for a very ancient food. We have like $5.
What do you guys have?
For like gourmet elders.
No, but I mean, you don't really have like
Not
food, do you?
no.
No, you have.
I've been trying to know other cities.
Okay, are you going to be able to take a couple of pictures? Right on. Okay, I'm here. Turn this around. Okay. I think we can get started.
Shirley. There's chairs in the just in the back room there. Okay. Yeah, go a little wider. Just check your. Okay. Welcome everyone. My name is Kelly Saxberg. I'm with the organizing crew of Bay Street Film Festival, and this is such an amazing turnout. Fantastic. With the collaboration with our local filmmaking co-op, Flash Frame Film and Video Network, and Bay Street Film Festival, we're offering these master classes. We had one, we kicked it off yesterday with a master class on 360 VR production. We'll have a 360 booth down in the embassy starting at 6 o'clock. You can come out and check it out, and we can show you our camera and our rig. We'll also be posting our workshop online, and so you can find out a little bit more. And then tonight at the Shag at 8 p.m., we're going to be having Scott Herman, who was a mentor in our workshop that we did this August, learning all about 360 and 360 production, and we made some of our own 360 productions. He's going to be giving a little quick presentation at the Shag at 8 p.m. and he'll be around to talk to people. But I'm really, really pleased to be able to introduce Chanda Chevannes from the Documentary Organization of Canada, Doc Institute. And we've had a partnership with Hot Docs for the past several years, and they offer to show documentaries and tour the country, and you have access to these great films. And some of our filmmakers have shown films at Hot Docs, and we've selected films to show in our Docs on Bay series, which was founded by Ben Karpik. we started doing that 3 years ago, I think, to have a year-round presence of not just the annual festival, but that we could have the festival, going year-round. And monthly feature-length documentary series where because we got a Northern Arts grant, we were able to bring filmmakers in. And so we made some good connections with Hot Docs. And this year, Dennis went to Hot Docs, Dennis Dubinsky, who's our festival coordinator. And he met the documentary organization of Canada people, and they contacted us and offered to provide this fantastic workshop for us, which will be followed up by webinars. So, and they sent Chanda here to give this great session. So, really happy with the turnout and welcome. We're streaming this live, so if anyone doesn't want to be in it, just give me the heads up, because I'll turn it. We're also recording it, so then later you can watch it. For people that missed it, that are interested, they can catch it on our YouTube channel. And all of last year's workshops, which we had some really fantastic workshops, they were also streamed and recorded, and they're up on our website. If you go to Masterclasses 2015, you can watch any of those, and there's some amazing workshops last year. And then this year we have we have Frederick, who is here, and he's going to be up next after this workshop, talking about documentary and adventure filming and all those challenges. And so just check the website or get your copy of the Walleye, where we have the whole program listed. And anyways, I'll let you take it away, Chanda. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Kelly. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm really happy. You can clap at the end if you liked it, and if not, you can boo. Okay, so this is a workshop on documentary producing. I have a PowerPoint presentation that we'll be going through, and I'll just kind of be chatting as we go. But I want it to be very interactive, so if you have a question, throw up your hand. If I'm not talking about something that you want to hear about, throw up your hand. If I'm talking too much about something that you don't care about, let me know and we'll just skip past it. I really want to provide what you want, and because we didn't know who was going to show up today, I couldn't really tailor it in advance to your needs. So let's try to just do it in the room if we can. We'll have a bit of fun, hopefully. Our favorite documentary hero, Bart Simpson. Filmmaking is art, obviously, and as documentary filmmakers, we think of ourselves as artists. I'm a producer, but I'm also a director. And if I'm being honest, the reason that I am a producer is because I want to direct, and I never could find a producer that I felt simpatico enough to work directly with them. So I produce my own projects as a way of getting them out into the world. So if you asked me, are you a business person or are you an artist, I would say I try to be both, but the artist usually wins if there's a fight, which there often is, which is why it's good to have a producer and a director, so you can have those fights out in the real world instead of in your psyche, which can cause real damage. But your producer is your best friend if you're a director, and if you're thinking about making your own films, or if you're thinking about producing other people's, there's a real dance that you have to do between business and art, and it's, I don't think anyone's totally cracked it, and I certainly haven't, but I can give you some kind of lessons that I've discovered along the way. So this is me. I'm Chanda Chevannes. I've been working in the documentary industry since 2001. This is my directing and producing filmography. I've done some other directing that I haven't produced, but these are the works that I've produced. And I got into documentary because I felt like I wanted to be creative and I wanted to do something that made a difference. As I was growing up and going in high school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study. And I was studying theater, I was thinking maybe about film or about writing, but then I was also studying biology and thinking, well, maybe I'll try to be a doctor, or maybe I should try to be a teacher. And it was like, I just talked about the war between business and art, but there was also this war between art and kind of social change inside of me. And so when I went to school, I went to Sheridan College in Oakville, in Southern Ontario. And there we did a great course in the National Film Board of Canada. And it was kind of a survey course of the history of Canadian film. And I watched all these amazing documentaries that were both really artful, but also had a strong social message. And not just a message, but they were actually trying to create change with them. And so I thought, oh, well, here's what I can do. I can do something artful that also tries to make a difference. And so that's how I got into documentary filmmaking. And these films that I've created are all social issues projects, which are also kind of harder to fundraise for, perhaps. Okay, so this is the kind of order of the day for us. So we'll start with some introductions, then I'll go over what I see as the producer's role. We'll talk about how you know what your story is for your doc, and how you understand who your audience is. We'll do a quick overview of documentary funding, and Kelly had mentioned that there is going to be 2 follow-up webinars. So one of the follow-up webinars is on fundraising. So I'm going to give you a very kind of quick overview of it, but then at the webinar you'll go into a lot more depth about fundraising if you're interested. And then we'll cover the life cycle of a production, so what the different steps are along the way, and what a producer is expected to do at each of those steps. And then we'll talk a little bit about digital convergence, which is kind of like a buzzword in the industry now. And then we'll wrap it up. There's not a kind of Q&A section because I'm assuming we're going to be doing lots of Q&A as we go. Okay, so we'll start with the introductions. I've already introduced myself. This is a bigger group than I thought it was going to be, but I would still like you to introduce yourself very quickly, just so I have an idea of kind of what the experience level in the room is and what you're all hoping to learn. So maybe if you can just tell me, you don't have to tell, if you have a professional background that relates to film, then you can mention it. Otherwise, maybe you can just tell us your name and what you're hoping to learn from the session, and I won't write your names down, but I'll write down what you're hoping to learn, and we'll try to actually cover it to that. So who wants to go first?
Well, my professional background as of like 2 months ago is photography, but why I'm really here is actually to get into film and hopefully either direct or act, and I'm hoping to learn everything that you have to teach. That's all.
Okay, everything I have to
Does that sum it up?
Yeah, that's great. And what's your name?
Chaz?
Chaz, nice to meet you.
I think too, Chanda.
Okay, who else? Yes.
My name is Keegan. I am been a filmmaker for a few years now, but now I'm back in my final year at Confederation College studying interactive media. And what I like to get out of this presentation is about budgeting and just how to promote your films.
Okay, go Lori.
Okay, I'm Lori McKay. I basically got started because my dad was on television as an audio technician in Los Angeles. He worked for NBC and Montrose in his lifetime, so that kind of got passed down to me. But I got sidelined by first grade and 2 years, and when that career ended, I decided to try film school. So I was at college, and that's where I met Patty, got involved with Flash 20 years ago. And helped coordinate the first film
Yes.
festival that we talked about. And then I got sidelined by parenting. And now my daughter is interested in filmmaking. And I'm here to support her in that interest. And perhaps maybe I'll get back into it too along with her.
Okay. And is there anything specific you're looking to learn in this session?
Anything and everything. It's fun. It's already up there.
And what about you? What are you hoping to learn?
I'm hoping to learn a bit about writing and pretty much everything about producing and directing.
So everything like that?
Yeah,
Right.
takes the stars.
Yeah. Who else? Yes.
I My name is Paul. I've done a bit of video work, and I also work for an NGO, and we're probably going to be pursuing a documentary next year. I guess I'm most curious about the setup, like the initial pitching, sort of like how to like, because everything's connected to everything else. So I've some methods or some reflections on how to get that pitch or that framing ready, and also trying to how the documentary lives on, like I guess the life cycle. Because if you are interested in change, like once it gets screened, that maybe is that the beginning of the process or the end of the process. So I'm just interested on that cycle between the sort of the film and the rest of the world.
Right. So we'll talk, the last question about how it lives on, we'll talk about it a little bit, but the second webinar is actually about festival strategy and audience engagement, and that's with Doc's Festival Concierge. We have someone on staff who, I should clarify, I'm just a member of Doc, I'm not a staff member or anything like that, but Doc has a staff member who does festival strategy for people and also does a lot of workshops on how to think about where your film needs to go next. So that will be, they'll really focus on that there.
I'm Frederick. I'm one of the filmmakers here. I'm doing the class after you, so I guess I'd really like to learn how you do class. Do it.
It's like baking cookies. It's easy.
How to teach a film class.
I'll lend you the PowerPoint after you just repeat it.
I've got like 4 of the same headings you did in the intro. So I'm freaking out.
It's probably I'm sure it's going to be very good. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I'm Elaine Lynch. I'm a volunteer for Doc Sunday and the Bay Street Film Festival, and I find documentaries very compelling. And I'm really interested to know how you get support, because I know TVO is a big supporter of documentary making. But as Paul has said, how do you share them and get them out there and keep them alive, because they're so worthwhile in terms of bringing people to issues and important things.
My name's Betty. I was involved in the Bay Street Film Festival and Flash Frame for a number of years. I made a short, what I call a pseudo-mentary. It's 4 minutes long. It's kind of a hilarious look at a real life item. I don't know. I will have to get a star at the top because I've gone to master classes before. I think they're just a great opportunity for people to learn. I don't have anything really specific.
Yeah, I'm Brad. I'm a filmmaker. What I'd like to learn more is that I'm fairly confident in my ability to make films, but I'm a horrible business person. Like horrible. I've driven one business into the ground already, and I can start it, and so I want to make sure that I'd like to learn about financing, budgeting, and stuff like that.
I actually thought of something specific I'd like to know a little bit more from your background, but what are some of the trends in documentary filmmaking?
Arlene, there's chairs back in there.
My name's Doug, and I make short documentary, and I know very little about any of that right now, and so right now I'm just sending my film to factory, and it's just all new. I don't know,
Festival strategy is hard for everyone, even people who make a lot of films too. And again, that will be covered in the webinar, but we can talk about it a little bit too. There's like thousands and thousands of festivals, so it's like, how do you know where to do films? It's always kind
Vera. I'm a production assistant by trade, and broadcasting graduate. Anyways, I want to learn about like distribution and brand and stuff like that, and just whatever. Really.
Oh, I have one question. Okay. Okay. I'm Kelly, and I just want to learn more about Documentary Organization of Canada, and from someone from a remote community, how it would benefit us to join and be members.
Well, I can answer that one right
Yeah.
now. I don't have to put it on the list.
Yeah.
So the is anyone familiar with the Documentary Organization of Canada? Okay, so DOC has been around for, I believe, almost 30 years. It's a cross Canada organization. There are 6 different chapters across the country, and it's a professional association. So the organization does things like lobbying, but then it also does professional development sessions like this one. I always say that I wouldn't still be a documentary filmmaker if I wasn't a member of DOC. And I've been a member since 2000. And the reason for that is that as documentary filmmakers, we often work in isolation. Even though I live in Toronto, I still feel very isolated in my work. You're by yourself every day, except for if you're shooting, but otherwise you're just kind of scrambling all the time. And you work by yourself, and you're never even sure if what you know is what someone else knows, and you're kind of you feel like you're always trying to make it up as you go along. And so for me, having the community of DOC was really useful because there's a listserv, just a simple email listserv. You can throw it a question and ask it, and lots of people will get back to you with answers. And the documentary community is really generous in the way that other areas of the film community maybe aren't quite as generous. There's less competition and more collaboration. And so I've really found a community because of DOC. And for people who aren't living in major production centers, there's a reduced membership fee because obviously you won't be able to access as regularly all the different kind of physical activities, but there are a lot of webinars. There's a lot of discounts for everything from like car rentals to equipment rentals, and it's just a wonderful organization. So I think it benefits everyone. Obviously, if you're in a production center, you do get a bit more benefit, but you get a discount if you're not, and so you feel more connected to the community, and you kind of get your finger on the pulse of what's going on too. You hear about a lot about news around documentary that you wouldn't if you weren't a member. You also get a free subscription to Point of View magazine, which is a quarterly magazine on the art of documentary film in Canada.
Great.
Thank you. We're always looking for more members because if we have more members, then we can do more great work. So, okay, so we've done our introductions. So we'll talk a little bit now about the producer's role, because often people say, okay, well, we kind of have a sense of what a director is, but what does a producer really do? So this is one of those memes that have been online about what different people think producers do. And I was actually listening to a webcast with Brian Grazer. Do you guys know who he is? Yeah, he's he produced like Apollo 13, he's producing Empire. And I really liked what he said about what a producer was. He said a producer has to hold the creative vision for the film alongside the financial reality for the film. What you have to do is you have to say to yourself, what is this film about? Encapsulate it in one sentence, and then everything you do for the film has to relate to that sentence. He said you draw a vertical line, and every time you're doing something, whether it's shooting a scene or raising money, you say, is it directly related to what the film is about? And if it's not, you pull it out because it's a waste of money. And that's the producer's job. And I love that because it's like way more straightforward than what my kind of discombobulated explanation would be of like, we budget and we raise the money and we work with the director and figure out what the story is and we yell at people who aren't doing their job and hire people who are. And that's kind of what I think of as a producer, but I liked kind of the very directness of what Brian Grazer said. So I just wanted to share that with you.
That's the end of the picture.
Bill. That's Brian Grazer.
Yes, that's right. Right there with the, you can't see, but he's got the crazy hair, right? So that's what a producer does. Now, and I guess maybe I'll throw it out to you guys. How would you define a producer? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when someone says producer?
Hard working.
Hard working, yeah. The good ones, hopefully.
Money.
Money, yeah. They're in charge of the money, so that's a big job in the beginning for the documentary producer, is raising the funding. And then managing the money as you go along, so making sure that you're not spending too much, negotiating with people, trying to get banks to give you loans, all of that is the producer's realm. What else? Paperwork, yeah. My husband, who, I shouldn't say this, well, it's being right past. Apparently he says that he's an editor, and he says that there is a saying that Canadian producers, the thing that we're best at is paperwork. Which I don't think it's true. I think we have a lot more skills, but there is a lot of paperwork to do, especially in the Canadian funding system. What else for producers?
I see maybe more for TV, like TV news. My friend works in, but the producers in TV news, like they do a lot of the research, like who they're going to interview. What's some of the framing, how the story is going to be set up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how that translates into documentary making.
So that's like a chase producer, and so they kind of go out and chase the story. In documentary, if you are a producer-director, then you do all of that. But if you are just a producer, then you might have a researcher doing a lot of the research. Initially, it's you by yourself, right? Maybe a director comes to you with an idea if you're a producer, or maybe it's your own idea. But at the beginning, you're trying to figure it out yourself, so you would be doing the research until you have some money to pay someone. But once you have the money, then it's someone else's job at that point to do it, hopefully. Okay, so what I think of when I think of producer is that we have the kind of an overall control of the production, and we're the driving force from beginning to end, and that there's a responsibility to hold the vision of the project, and that's what I was talking about, that Brian Grazer said. There's a business vision and a creative vision, and we keep them together and we keep moving through the process with that vision in mind. So if you are a director and you're working with a producer can sometimes kind of feel like this. Because there are a lot of painful moments, but a good producer will keep you on schedule and on budget and on task. This could be how the director feels when they're working with a producer. If they need something in the budget, the producer won't let them have it. But I don't know if anyone's heard the expression "kill your darlings." Kill your darlings.
I know, but I'm just like, why would you kill your darling?
Because it's an expression that comes from the writing world. Often the thing that we're the closest to in the creative process is something that's not working in the film. You might have a favorite, speaking as a director, you shoot a lot of stuff and you fall in love with your material. And sometimes you fall in love with scenes because of things that have nothing to do with the film. The film that I'm working on right now, I had a very long production process, and I was working with like a big team of people, and eventually I ran out of money, and because I lost the war between business and art won. I didn't stop shooting when I should have, and I didn't have any money left to keep working with the crew, so I went out and shot myself. And the first shoot that I did really well, I desperately wanted to keep it in the film because it was my work, and it wasn't really ego. It had more emotional meaning to me because I had been there, I had been doing everything, and so when I watched it, I felt something that no one else felt when they were watching this scene, right? So it came out, but that was kind of a moment of killing your darlings.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
what that means. And a producer, a good one, working in tandem with a director, will help you see which darlings you have to kill. You don't have to kill all of them, just some.
I thought you meant killing your cat or your dog.
No,
or
don't
something
do
like
that. That's not a documentary. That's something else.
Oh, that's murder?
So that's the producer's role in a nutshell. Knowing your story and understanding your audience. So this is kind of where we get to the meat of it, and some of the questions around pitching and how to get support are really woven into how well you know your story. So the story starts here. It starts one place and you develop it into something else. Sometimes they start as fairly vague ideas. Maybe there's a person who's intriguing to you. Often with documentaries, it's an issue like, one of my films is about cancer in the environment. So I was really interested in this issue, but I didn't really have a formulated story that I wanted to tell. That's particularly true, I think, with documentaries, is that we don't always quite have the story in our mind. But in order to be able to raise money, you really need a good sense of the story. And then later on, once you've got the money, you need a great sense of the story in order to be able to make a good film. So I'm curious about you guys and if you have specific ideas that you are hoping to make documentaries about. Does anyone, can you, maybe just a show of hands if you have an idea in mind already for a film? Okay, so more than half of you, that's great. I wasn't going to do this, but would anyone like to share their idea in like 2 or 3 sentences?
Well, it's based on another documentary I did. It's about it's a series I wanted to do. Last year I made a film about autism in the arts and how art is a good combination for people who have autism. And I want to make a series of interviewing individual people because I really wanted to get to know more of that person, and that way it'll be like maybe interview 5 or 10 people and just have a 5 or 10 episode show.
Great. So does anyone, so what would make that kind of synopsis really compelling to a funder? Sorry, what's your name again?
Keegan.
What could Keegan tell us about that would really hook our attention?
The art and the study of autism.
Okay. What that wasn't in there might be helpful to know. What would help you to be able to picture the film or the series a little bit better?
Well, maybe a comparison of people with forms of autism that haven't done anything about the arts and those who did.
So talking about how, what the issue is and how it affects real people. Is that it? Yeah, that could be good. What about, do you know any people that you're thinking of profiling in the series yet?
Not really at this moment.
Okay. So that's a good place to start, kind of when you do your initial research, is to look for the people through whom you're going to tell the story. Because often, what I would say, like when we're talking about trends in documentary, this is like a trend that's, very big and has been big for a while, so it will go away at some point. But everyone wants character-driven films. So films that are about a person, you follow that person and you learn about the issue. People are less interested right now in funding issue films that are like more essay pieces. They're really looking for to connect with individual characters. And even if you were doing something that was more of an essay film that was trying to make an argument or just prove a point, you still might want to talk about one of the people who will be in your film, whether it's an expert interview or a subject, just to give us a sense of who we'll see, how we'll feel, what we'll learn, but not in a kind of like educational way, in a more kind of human way. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? Yep. So these are kinds of questions that you can ask yourself about your film. What's the story you're hoping to tell? Is it well formed or is it an idea, and what's the difference? So I think I kind of described that there, but I can also tell you about a film that I worked on, that I'm working on. It's the same one that I just mentioned, where I was shooting it by myself. So it's called Unfractured at the moment, and until recently, here's how I was describing it. I was saying it's a documentary about the anti-fracking movement in upstate New York. I'm following people on both sides of the issue to try to watch as they fight for a ban on fracking. And then in 2014, they did win a ban, and so the film tells that story. That's how I was pitching it before. And I realized, as soon as I said the word fracking, everyone would just kind of tune out. They didn't, There's so many documentaries about fracking people didn't want to hear. And that's another thing with the trends is when you're watching a trend happen, it's kind of already, like it's past. By the time you make your film, if you're making it to fit that trend, it will be gone. So you have to get ahead of the curve, and I'm terrible at that. Terrible. But I think I picked films for different reasons other than kind of their log line. I picked them because there's something interesting about the character or the subject to me that I'm interested in exploring. So now, when I pitch the film, what I say is, I'm working on an observational documentary that follows a woman whose name is Sandra Steingraber, and she is a scientist, and she is very shy, but she decided she wanted to become an activist, and she went to war with the oil and gas industry in upstate New York. And everyone told her that she was fighting an unwinnable war, and she said, no, it's not unwinnable, I'm going to win, but the way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to go all in, I'm going to give up all my money, all my time. So she has 2 kids, but she had her husband take care of them, and she is a writer, but she stopped writing, and she won $100,000, and she gave it all to the movement, and what she was fighting for was a ban on fracking. And in 2014, she won. But through it all, her husband started having strokes. And she had to decide whether she was going to go home and take care of her family or whether she was going to keep fighting. See, so that's like a stronger pitch than just kind of outlining the issue. And it takes a while to figure out what the core of your story is, right? And it took me, I was working on it for 2.5 years before I could say that to people. So sometimes it takes a while. But it's worth the exercise of just trying to do that, because once you get that nugget, it's a lot easier to raise the money, and it's a lot easier to make the movie too. Okay, so we are going to do a little group exercise about knowing your story and understanding your audience. Now, what I did was I brought some one-sheets. Do you guys know what a one-sheet is? Some people do, some people don't. Okay. So a one-sheet is hopefully a fairly nicely designed piece of paper that has some nice graphics on one side, the title of your movie, some logos, and then on the back it has a synopsis. And it's what you use to sell your film initially. These are because of the digital world, they're not printing so much anymore. Sometimes people do little websites. Sometimes people just do trailers. But they're still useful to kind of look at and see what's happening. So these are, I have 4 one-sheets for films created by my friends. They've all, well, one's mine, but the other ones are other people's. The least nicely designed ones, because I didn't but they have all been released, so it gives you an idea of some of the films that are out there as well. So what I thought I'd do is I'd break you into groups. I'll give you each a different one-sheet. And then you'll just look at the one sheet and see if you can answer these 2 questions. What's the story that they're trying to sell? And who is the audience and where would it be seen? Okay, and I'll give you, I don't know how long do you think you need to do this. You'll read it and then talk about it. 10 minutes? Is that enough?
I'm going to give it to half an hour because I didn't pass English. I just slept right through the English class. All right, half an hour maybe? Ready to go?
But we'll try 10 and we'll see how it goes. So maybe I'll just count you off into, so that we have 4 groups. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it's even. Okay?
That's scary.
So let's have, you can move your chairs around. So maybe we'll have 1s here. We'll have 2s at the back, 3s there, and 4s here. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh my God. So where? Yo, who's in? You 3? Wish you were. I was trying to find you on Facebook, like, what's going on today?
You have just turned.
I never use it.
Good, how are you, Keegan? Pretty good.
Are you okay? So 1, so you see this one. Hold your seat. I've got 2 copies.
Okay. Chris, 3?
You're one?
Yes.
Don't look at it if you're not a one.
I think I'm
You're a
one.
one. I think I'm a one.
Are you a 1?
I think
I know I am.
I strove to be a 10 at one point, but now
Oh well, it doesn't matter.
And then anybody else at 2?
Everybody, the more the merrier, right?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
You meet in person.
Yeah, as opposed to just a screen shot, right? I'm just gonna pull up this chair here.
Yeah.
But anyway,
They're all tilt. So you're going to sit down. You have the puller C.
Is this group 4? So this is a little bit longer than one sheet. So I was going to go get my. I was going to go. Sure. I'm going to run down. It's like this is a bigger group. Yeah.
We take one from my heaven on one.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to work together.
Yeah.
Well, maybe somebody. Do you want to come over here?
Wasn't this a 360? Just don't worry
Yeah,
about it.
we're actually showing that.
Like, I
Oh,
saw
are
this
you?
in 360.
We're showing that on our.
Yeah,
So there's a 10-part series that was for TVO, and then they did a 360 as well.
And how long was it? 360?
Yes, yes, it is.
I like literally just looked this up last night. I was like, I need to watch this show.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. My husband edited it.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, not the 360, just the regular. What do you call it? The flat version.
I'm in development of my own Arctic doc.
Oh, really?
Everybody's doing the wrong
Everyone
thing
is
to do.
doing this.
So we're gonna, yeah, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think you're coming up just right, man. That makes sense.
Actually, we really oh, you know that sweet and
So what is the story?
Very nice.
yeah.
People Titanic.
Yeah, the unseen is larger than the seen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So here's what's behind it. It's a multimedia expedition that will bring a group of renowned musicians, brilliant scientists, and fascinating characters together in one of the most storied places on Earth, the Northwest Passage. Their mission is to explore the changing Arctic landscape through adventure, experiment, and music. A mere century ago, this journey was already possible. Now, as blue water spreads over the Arctic Ocean, it's becoming routine. A century ago, most of the Inuit that Royal Amundsen encountered had never seen a southerner. Today, the passage in summer is open water as climate change transforms the Arctic biology, landscape, culture, wealth, and geopolitical importance. What the Polar Sea will give viewers, readers, and listeners all over the world is a sneak peek of tomorrow, when the circumpolar Arctic will become a northern Mediterranean. Though bordered by Canada, Russia, America, and Scandinavia, it will be sailed, peopled, and coveted by any nation that has boats, industries, and appetites. The Polar Sea is a groundbreaking 10-hour television series that is a fresh hybrid of adventure, science, and arts programming. It will tell the epic story of what happens when the coldest place on Earth starts to melt. I'm sold.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, the boom.
That's
the boomers
exciting.
will Pick that up like no
Oh,
tomorrow.
absolutely.
But is it enough of a hook for the younger audience?
I think so.
I think so because of the fact that musicians are going.
Where's it
You know,
airing?
that makes it current
Is
and
it on
hip, right?
TVO? Well, then I'm all the older people
Knowledge
like me are
Network,
watching it.
which is I think skews older.
Okay.
Art, where's that? Is it Tibet?
I've heard of it though, you know?
It's probably an older demographic. I understand.
Yeah. You know what? We're all in panic mode. Well, I shouldn't say we are. I'm older than you guys, but I'm just saying I think it appeals. There's definitely
This lady from I will tell you, I've had plenty of birds.
TV Franco-Ontarian German TV network.
It's Ontario, okay.
European channel that promotes programming in the areas of culture and art.
So it's a worldwide, an international audience.
Yeah, it's definitely Europe.
Yeah, they can probably sell this all over the place.
Yeah.
Probably.
It's international, it appeals to all ages.
I'm gonna bet
Well,
it skews
I don't know
older
about
male.
the under 12. A savvy 10-year-old maybe.
Yeah.
That's a crappy picture.
Yeah.
Do you want me to look at you or
But
just
I think we can put all ages together. What is the story?
I don't think children are watching this. I definitely don't.
Well,
think.
no, that they're not watching it, but it has an element of education to it. So 10 and over, like I say, savvy 10-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to get 15-year-olds virally watching this. Except
A 15-year-old is quite different than a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old can sit and watch it. A 15-year-old is you know, like, who cares? Well, I can't say that. I don't have
if I was a 15-year-old kid, I'm not sure renowned musicians, brilliant scientists, and fascinating characters in Northwest Passage would get this.
Only precocious kids.
I'm just thinking as a broadcaster, if we were pitching this, I'd be like, if you're trying to sell me this, that this is good for children, I'm not giving you money.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's all ages. It appeals to all ages, from the young to the young at heart, like the young to 9 years old. That it's not pigeonholing a certain age group, but rather the whole family can sit together and watch it and talk about it. Explain to the children what they don't understand, but have a stimulating conversation between the generations as to what the elders may have known inside, but what's the reality for the young.
I still disagree that it would have the attention of young children. From high school up, sure, but the young ones won't. They want entertainment, and if you look at programming that's targeting the young generation, it is all entertainment.
It was hosted by Jennifer Lawrence. I think you pulled that in, but I don't know.
Enough said, let's move on.
Okay, so
what's the story they're trying to sell?
What's right there?
True. The melting of the melting of the sea ice.
It's a
the opening of the passage.
It's a huge.
It used to be closed. Now it's open.
It's a huge. Yeah, it's a big change. It's a big.
And what's the implications, right? What are the implications of the change?
The impact. I think it's probably about struggling over ownership and access and. Didn't they already do this? Didn't they put a lot of artists and writers and everyone in a boat?
They've been doing that non-stop for the last 10 years.
And done a documentary
There's lots
format.
of them. You've got to make a documentary.
I've seen this is ringing a bell, but obviously this is the focus in Northwest Pass.
Okay, time's
Yeah,
up. Cool.
What was it? The space captain, kind of space captain, was up there this summer.
Yeah.
Like with artists, like it's everybody's.
Yeah.
And they found the boat.
So it's
They did.
too,
They found the air.
it's too trendy, eh?
Well, that's like you said, finding a kind of unique thing.
Yeah.
A lot of uniqueness now is the signing of that
I don't
boat
drink
on the water.
coffee.
Yeah, I know, but
Right.
Shannon's like, what's going on? Cheryl?
Okay. So does anyone want to briefly share what their film was about and where it might be seen?
Songbird. Okay, so this is basically the story about the threat to the songbirds in society and what can be done about it to be interested in that. Like anyone who is, I want to say, PETA or people who are interested in animal welfare, that sort of thing, those sorts of festivals.
Great. So this was a film. It's actually when they were pitching it, it was called Songbird SOS, but now it's called The Messenger. And it's been doing really well in theatrical release and film festivals. And they did a version for CBC's The Nature of Things. And so, people who are kind of interested in science and nature, which is exactly what you said. And they also formed partnerships with an organization called Bird Studies Canada. And through them, they're making the film available for screenings. There are so many birders, right? People who travel all over and are interested in watching birds. It's this whole kind of like subculture. And that's one thing about, getting your film out to people. If you have a film that can tap into a specific subculture, then that really helps you, because then every community you go to, there are little pockets of people who are interested in that topic and want to see your film for that reason. So sometimes it's hard to figure out who your exact subculture is, but once you can find it, you have an opportunity for really powerful screenings, and then also for DVD sales and things like that afterwards, as long as the people know about your project.
That one would seem fairly obvious.
That one's a very obvious one, yeah. Thank you very much. Who would like to go next?
Sure. My group were doing Living Downstream, which is your film. And we noticed that it was a movie about it's about a town that was near a factory, and people have been diagnosed with cancer because of the water source in the river. And we noticed that the film is good for environmentalists, especially agricultural too as well, because I know there is some agriculture in your film, and also, sorry, I'm just battling here. I think it's yes, in public health. Thank you, and public health too as well. But yeah, this is definitely a movie that a lot of people need to see. I think they're one of the main groups that people should really concentrate on seeing. And also just looking at the pictures, I just think it looks really nice. It looks nicely shot, and I think it's great for people to do too as well.
I think you're better than the instructor up here. Lisa.
I was just gonna say it's a really beautiful film. I've seen it, and that's how I kind of met Chanda. And the story is really compelling because because of her subject matter, because of the person, because of Sandra, and
yeah, Zoomer with a cherry on top. I don't know. We feel it's a film that would be great on a big screen. So film festivals, also it would work in broadcast, and Victoria suggested in science centers.
Oh yeah, that's great. So Starman did do some good festival screenings. It had some theatrical play in England too, in theaters, which is really nice for a documentary. It's kind of the thing we always chase, and who knows why, because you don't actually make any money, but there's something amazing about seeing your film on a big screen. And this film is, it has beautiful time-lapse photography of the stars. So that for that alone, it's worth seeing it on the big screen. And the filmmaker is actually currently doing a U.S. University tour. So she's going to Harvard and 3 or 4 other big universities to screen her film there. So she's 2 astronomy classes mostly.
Princeton is in there too?
It might be Princeton. I don't remember. Because I'm being videotaped, I don't want to lie. So otherwise, I'd lie all over the place here.
Who doesn't lie?
Lisa.
So was her association with Zoomer, with Vision, was that an early partnership for broadcast? Is that what
Yeah, so it was on Vision, and it was so Vision is now transitioning. They used to be focused on religious content, and now they're focused on Zoomers, on like living a fabulous life as you get older. But I believe that it was actually bought when it was a religious Vision, because the men are nearing the end of their life, so they're becoming more contemplative. They're thinking about God and death and all of those things and kind of mysteries of the universe. So that's how she pitched it to them, and it does feel like that when you watch the film. It's not just a film about a bunch of scientists kind of talking about their discoveries. It does make you think about the world and our existence. So that's why Vision picked it up, but now it works perfectly for both of those different mandates for them. So, and the last one, Polar Sea Group.
Somebody else wants to talk about it. I guess I will do something and sit in front. Okay, I'll do my best. The Polar Sea is a movie about the changing Arctic landscape. It's exploring how the Arctic is changing and how it potentially can transform city's landscape, culture, and its wealth and geopolitical importance, and how that will affect the potential future for those areas. The audience for this would probably most likely be interested by people that are high school age and up, and mostly the northern hemisphere on both sides of the road, but there might be some activists that would also from the southern hemisphere that would be interested, but it probably northerners more likely they would be interested in this one. Where it would be seen, I would presume where all documentaries are typically seen, on TV, and on video and film festivals.
Great. Yeah. So this was a 10-part series. It was broadcast in Canada on TV Ontario, and internationally was broadcast on Arte, which is a German and a French broadcaster. And it tells the story of three men from Scandinavia, I can't remember if they're Finnish or Swedish, who decide to take a sailing trip through the Northwest Passage. And so they start in Iceland, and then they go to Greenland, and then they travel through the Canadian Arctic. And it's 10 parts, and each part focuses on a portion of their journey. So it's like a road trip without a road. And they meet amazing travelers along the way and learn about the Arctic culture. And kind of the undercurrent is about climate change and how it's changing the Arctic and changing our future, really.
Quick question, like, so let's say a regular document, like a 90-minute documentary gets aired on that German channel or whatever. How much money would the production people get?
Yeah.
Is there a high and low areas?
Well, I've never worked with a German company, so I can't speak to that. But what I can say is the way that funding a documentary works is that you figure out how much it's going to cost you to make it, ballpark, and then the first step is to go to a broadcaster and to try to get someone who's interested. This is the traditional kind of like businessy way to do it. There's also like a scrappy artsy way, and I'll talk about that too. But the traditional businessy way is you go to a broadcaster with this. This is kind of your first thing, your one sheet, and you pitch them the film. Often now they also want to see some footage, like an interview with your character or something to give them a sense of what it's going to look and feel like. They're actually more interested in that than they are in the one sheets anymore. But so you go to them with your idea, and then they'll tell you if they're interested, and then eventually you negotiate, and they'll tell you how much they'll give you. Traditionally in Canada, from a Canadian broadcaster, at this early stage of production, it's 10 to 30% of your budget. So budgetary numbers are confidential, and it's hard to find out from people what they are, but my film, the one that I talked about, which was the observational one where I was following her for 3 years, the budget for that was $500,000. And so you can imagine that you would be asking a broadcaster for 10% to 30% of that. I didn't fund it that way, I funded it another way, but that's how you would do it. So you start with the broadcaster. When the broadcaster comes on board, that's called trigger funding. And what it does is it triggers you to be able to apply to a whole bunch of other funders to get the rest of the money. So then you go to Arts Council, not Arts Councils, independent production funds, and you go to government-sponsored funds, and you still have to apply, and there's a bunch of boxes that they have to check, and the creative comes into it then too. But that's how you make up your budget. And you do all of that. This is, again, the traditional way. You do all of that before you actually start making the thing. So you don't start working until you've gotten all your money in, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've been working on it, you've spent all the money, and you can't afford to finish it, and then someone's waiting for it, because they will obviously come back for the money. Of course, these traditional broadcasters won't give you funding unless they're confident that you can finish it. So you do have to get all of your money in place first. Okay, so back to the story for a minute. These are some of the questions that you can ask yourself to help you figure out what the story is. So who are the characters? What's the film's narrative arc? So this is the interesting thing. When you start off in documentary, you say, okay, well, I know it's going to be a documentary about my friend who has breast cancer, who's an artist, and she's making an art piece about her experience with breast cancer. And then they say, well, what's going to happen in the movie? And you say, well, I don't know because I haven't shot it yet. Like, I'm going to follow her and we're going to see what happens. But for funders, that's not good enough. You really have to be able to tell them what you think is going to happen and the way that you're going to tell the story. So even though it hasn't happened, you have to be able to imagine what might happen. So you sit down and you write yourself a treatment. And a treatment is like an outline of the film. That when someone's reading it, it's almost as if they're watching the film. So they can picture it, not necessarily scene by scene, but like, you know, big chunk by big chunk about what's going to happen. And so one thing that you do is you're figuring out how to play in your film is you figure out what you think the trajectory of the film is going to be. And that's a really tricky part. And everyone understands that if you're making a documentary and you say it's going to be like this in the treatment, they know that it might not be like that in the end. So you don't have to worry about lying. But I still always put like a caveat in, because sometimes I'll like say, this person says this, and then I'll say like, that person didn't actually say that, just so you know. Just to cover myself, because I do try to pull real quotes from people too. I do very detailed interviews with people and type out what they say, and then I use some of the language of what they talk about. But basically try to imagine your film and what it will be. And even if you're going to just do something with your little handy cam, you're not going to go to the traditional funders to try to raise money, it's still really useful to do that process of imagining how the film might begin and just imagining what happens next. Because then as you're going through production, you're following someone around, if those moments happen, you can remember how you imagined that you would capture them, and you can try to capture them in the same way. It's funny, the first treatment that I wrote for this film that I'm working on now started with my character getting up in the morning and rehearsing a speech and going through her day and then going to the speech. And you have elements of both of those things in the final film. And it was just a coincidence that it happened that way because I have long since forgotten about the treatment. But the film begins with her getting up in the morning. And then about 15 minutes into the film, you have her rehearsing a speech. And those look pretty much exactly how I imagined them, even though it was probably 2 years between writing that treatment and actually filming it. But those ideas stay in your mind, so spend some time imagining how you might like it to be, and that's going to stick with you when you're actually doing the work. Other questions to ask: what's the film's point of view? And funders will always want to know this, and your crew will want to know this. Like, what is your? It could be, what is your opinion? What's the style of the project? So, you know, the point of view could be very journalistic. I'm telling a story about this specific issue. I'm going to interview the guy on this side. I'm going to interview the girl on this side. And I'm going to create it like an argument back and forth between two people. And then the audience can decide. That's one kind of film. Another film is, it's going to be observational. I'm not doing any interviews. I'm just going to follow this person and watch what they do and then try to create a film out of it. It could be, I have a really strong opinion about environmental issues, and I am going to do something that's advocacy-based. So my film Living Downstream was advocacy-based. It made an argument, it told a story, but at the end of the day I was hoping to move people to actually doing something. So that has like a specific kind of mission attached to it. So you figure out what your point of view is, and that dictates what kind of funding you can get and how you're going to make your film. And that's an important thing to think about as a creator. And this could be more a question, if you're producing and not directing, could be more of a question for the director, but that's something to get your partner to think about if you are not the director as well. And then what kind of access do you have to your characters, their stories, and other key people and events? You know, I've got a great idea. I want to do a film about Barack Obama. Well, do you know Barack Obama? Can you follow him around? Or is it going to be, you know, purely stock footage? And if it's going to be stock footage, do you have the money to pay for all that footage? So those are the kinds of things that you have to think through with a documentary specifically. And if you have a really great subject that you want to follow, then having something in writing saying that they agree to work with you is useful kind of early on in the process.
Can I ask you a question about, so once you've developed your story or new treatment, is there like a process of workshopping it so that other people can see see it, or are you just kind of keeping it in your little pods?
That's a good question. What I do is I show things to people. So I have friends who are also filmmakers, and so I get them to read stuff. There's As you're kind of talking to people about your idea, that's also a workshopping process. So you're refining it. You pay attention when you're talking about an idea to see when people's eyes start to trail off when they're not paying attention, and that helps you focus in. There's no official process that I know of for like workshopping a treatment, but I definitely send it to friends and get feedback from them, and then rewrite it and then send it to new friends, and do it that way too. And definitely when you're making the film, with the treatment, I get a few people to look at it, but when you're making the film, there's lots and lots of people who look at it at different stages, because you do get too close to it, and you think, oh, this is very clear, and no one knows, no one has the kind of understanding that you do, so they don't see it as clearly. So it's very important to get a lot of people to watch it, and different kinds of people have different experiences too. And that's like the worst part of the process, because it's like taking your heart out and handing it to someone else, something you've been working on for so many years. But it's really important and a very helpful part of the process. Okay, so producers always think about who owns the story. You'll hear the term intellectual property or IP, and that's basically your creative thing. Now, you cannot copyright an idea. So if you have like a loose idea in your head, no one owns that idea, even though it's yours. But written material, photographic material, a work that you can see and touch and hold, those can be copyrighted. So it's at that stage where it becomes your property. There is an official copywriting process, but once you've made it, you put a copyright mark on it and it's copyrighted. Chain of title is like a very official term that they use to track the ownership of a project. And so if someone comes to you with an idea and they want you to produce it, usually what a producer will do is they will take over the ownership of that project. And the way that they do that is that they have a rights agreement. So the person with the idea gives the rights to the producer to try to sell. It might be that you're going to do a co-production, so you're going to split the rights to the project. The chain of title is the documentation to prove that you do have the rights to actually develop the project. Production company is your company. It's called a Prodco sometimes. And your idea has value, but it probably doesn't have a lot of monetary value until you realize it as something. But you should protect your work, obviously, but also protect your investment time in your projects. This is more about the audience. So there are different, and we're kind of getting into funding now. There are different places where your project can go. And so even though it's not done yet, you're still kind of developing the idea, still raising the money. You have to figure out, where in the world do you want this project to be? So is it going to live on television? Is it going to be somewhere like Netflix or some other over-the-top service? Are you trying for the kind of coveted movie theater, or are you going to start somewhere else, like maybe YouTube? And that's something to think about right off the bat, because that will determine what the film is like and and where you're going to try to go get money for it. So we talked already about who your audience is, but I really struggle with it sometimes in the beginning. And they say one really good tip is to imagine the person who's going to be watching your film. Is she a 40-year-old yoga mom who's just dropped her kids off and she's sitting down to watch Netflix before she has to go do the laundry, or while she's doing the laundry? Who is that person, and where are they watching TV? And that's one way to figure out where you should take it. And why should they watch it? Why should they watch it is another question to think about. What's going to compel your audience to watch your project? So when I mentioned the traditional kind of funding over here, that's slowly going away, and there's less money. Television companies have less money, the government has less money, everyone has less money. And so this is still where the most money is, but gradually people are moving into these kind of new worlds. And there's less barriers to entry. So the traditional model is kind of a hard one to crack. And I've had my films on television, but I've never started them off as projects that were funded by broadcasters because it is a really hard place to start. So I get money from other places. So we're moving to overview of documentary funding. And I've already said there's traditional, and then there's this other thing that we don't really have a name for, but we'll call it alternative funding, for lack of a better title. And sometimes they can work together. So you can have money from a broadcaster, and then you can have some of these alternative funds as well.
It's called AF.
Pardon?
AFF, AF, artistic
Yeah.
alternative, AF.
We should just start that right now. AF. It's the new thing.
It's more interesting to call than artistic alternative. Like AF.
Yeah, AF. So we've got traditional and we've got AF. So this is kind of the way that the money breaks down, okay? There's way more money for TV than over-the-top services, a little bit of money for theatrical, and a little bit of money on YouTube. And don't ask me about YouTube because I don't know how people make money at it, but I wish I did because, I mean, I do know that it's ads and stuff like that. But it is an interesting model, and a lot of younger people are kind of coming up through the YouTube world. So the traditional television funding is, I said a portion of your budget is the TV license fee, and then you have a portion of your budget. These are public-private partnerships, so government money and broadcaster money combined, and then independent production funds. Again, you apply to them, and then tax credits, which is government money. So that's kind of what makes up your traditional funding structure if you're going the regular route. And these are some of the places in Canada. These are the main broadcasters where you would take a one-off documentary. You guys know the term one-off? It's like not a series, right? It's like one thing.
Or a spin-off.
Yeah, a spin-off is a little different.
Oh.
Yeah, but one-off is like a one thing. So all of the projects except for the Polar Sea would be considered one-offs. Okay? And then there's more opportunities for documentary series. Series are great for broadcasters because you get repeat viewing, you can play them over and over again, so they like them more than they like one-offs, and there's more money available.
You forgot AMC. If you're going to shove in American stuff, because I see Animal Planet on there, which is American, I believe, but it's got AMC.
Okay, well, we will add it for the next workshop. Yes. So this is some alternative funding ideas, and this is kind of where my wheelhouse tends to be. So there are arts councils where you can apply for funding, and there you have to have made a film before. That's the criteria in order to apply. And you have to be living in the geographic region. So Ontario Arts Council, you have to be living in Ontario. Canada Council, you have to be living in Canada. I don't know if there's a regional arts council here or not. Is there?
No, but we have access to Northern Arts with the Ontario Arts Council.
Okay, Northern Arts. Okay. So those are some great. I love the arts councils, and they've funded my projects. The grant applications are very dense, but you can get a decent amount of money for your projects, and they're very supportive of artists. And if you have a strong vision, they're very supportive of that too. It's a really nice place to get funding. The National Film Board of Canada is the nation's producer, and they produce documentaries, and they also produce animations. And they are interested in working with people from all over the country. They're really interested in being as regional as possible, and with people at a lot of different skill levels. And they're very approachable as well. The Ontario Centre is headquartered in Toronto, but they are welcoming. And they have a small program called the Filmmakers Assistance Program. You can apply and get funding of up to $5,000 from them for a first documentary or an early documentary. And then there's Bravo Factual. You guys heard of Bravo Factual?
I've never one.
Yes. Oh, so Bravo, there's Bravo is a television channel, but then they also have this grant that they give for short documentaries. So a documentary that's 15 minutes or less, you can apply and you can get up to $50,000 from them for your project, and then it airs on their website. It doesn't go on Bravo TV yet. But they do have 2 funding calls every year, and again, they're looking for Canadian stories from documentary filmmakers all over the country, emerging and more experienced filmmakers as well. Then there are some local film festivals that often have small grants. There are filmmaker collectives that have grants, and then there's crowdfunding, which is, you guys know crowdfunding, by Kickstarter. You go online and make all your friends give you money. And that's basically it. I mean, it's great. It's great to create buzz for your project and to get people interested in it. But I think something like 70 or 80% of the people who will give money to your project are people that you know. So you might just go around with a hat.
Or throw a big party and
Yeah.
Get everyone drunk.
Yeah, you can do your own fundraising parties too, for sure. I mean, all of those ways. And then of course there's in-kind contributions, right? So getting someone else to help you out and share their expertise with you, and you don't pay them, and then you share your expertise with them, and they don't pay you, so you do trades. I've done a lot of that in my career too.
So would you consider the National Screening Institute, would you consider those more educational or funding?
Yeah, so the NSI is
No, they have documentary, they have Aboriginal, they have TV series. There's about 8 or 9 different programs, and but it started off for people to have their merging filmmakers, but also your first features.
Yeah, there's like a shorts to feature program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I consider them an educational group, but they do provide some funding. So it's and there are a few like that where it's kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. People talk a lot about the Canadian Film Centre, which is a school, but you do get access to equipment and all these people, and you do produce your own film. So those are possibilities as well too. If you're kind of getting your first film done, if you're looking to do that. And I did want to just say that these are not exclusive to emerging filmmakers, but they do help emerging filmmakers a lot. One other alternative thing that isn't up there that actually should be is foundations. So there are 2 kinds of foundations. There are foundations for film, like Bravo Factual is actually a film foundation. So there are organizations that are set up to give money for films. There are a lot in the States. Often they're associated with film festivals like Sundance, Tribeca. They're very, very competitive. But then there are other foundations that are not specifically set up for films, that are set up to help pursue a specific social mandate. So my film, Living Downstream, was funded in part by a grant from a foundation called the Ceres Trust, which is interested in sustainable agriculture. So because the film was about Illinois and farming, they were interested in giving me money to make my film because they felt that my film would have an educational mission and it would do something in the world that they wanted to promote with their foundation. And there are a lot of foundations in the States, specifically, that will do that, and they will, it's a bit of a complicated working, but they will give money to Canadian filmmakers. So that's another way to go. And with them, they're interested in knowing what your film's about, and they're interested in knowing what you plan to do with it and how you plan to use it to make change. But they're less interested in like how many people are going to watch it, because they focus on quality rather than quantity. So are you getting your message out to the people that we need to get out to? If that's 2,000 people instead of the million on TV, that's okay, because those 2,000 people are going to get up and they're going to do something that we want them to do tomorrow because of seeing your film. So it's a different kind of relationship, and they're also, with broadcasters with the traditional funding model, they're interested in they're interested in the creative, and they're going to help you shape it, which is really useful because they know their audience. But the foundations and the arts councils, they aren't going to help you shape it. You're the artist. You will do the work, and they're kind of putting their faith in you in a way. So it's a very different kind of relationship, I guess is what I'm saying. and both have their place, and both are really useful depending on what you're trying to do. Canadian content. I'll talk about this very quickly. You guys have heard the term Canadian content?
Yes.
Do you know what it means?
I can give you a brief thing. Pretty much, you can't be anything outside of Canada. This is what I heard from a friend of mine who's in production, but he told me that Canadian content is pretty much like stuff that's based in Canada, formerly from Canada, not outside Canada, like not from the States, but mostly like branched in Canada, like say BC or any of like the Indigenous groups or in anything in Canada, pretty much like that.
Yeah. So what it is the CRTC, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, which is the government body that regulates telephones and television and radio, has a rule that says a certain amount of what Canadian broadcasters put on TV has to be made by Canadians. Okay, and it's the same thing with like songs, right? Like on the radio, like. Why do we have such a great music industry? It's because the radio stations had to play all these Canadian songs. So we have the Tragic and Hip and all these great bands, and that's part of the reason is because Canadians got the opportunity to hear it because of this government regulation. So the television stations have the requirement to do the same thing. And there is a very specific way of counting your crew and figuring out whether it's Canadian or not Canadian. And that's a point system. So that's CanCon. But what broadcasters also want often is they want films about Canada because they figure we can take our money and buy an American film and get a great American film about an American story. But if we have to spend money on Canadian productions, then we want them to be about Canadians because we can spend less money and get like a big blockbuster kind of movie from the Americans. So give us your Canadian stuff. So that's something that filmmakers are always thinking about. How can I tell a Canadian story? And because we are interested often in global issues and social issues, Canadians are often finding, documentary filmmakers are often finding a way to put in a Canadian element into their story. Or, maybe I'm really interested in HIV in Africa. So, but instead of just going to Africa and making a film about it, I'm going to go with a Canadian nurse who's going to Africa. I'm going to tell the story through her eyes so that the audience can relate and so the broadcaster is going to be interested in it. And you can tell by the tone of my voice that I don't really love that approach, but it's what sometimes you have to do. So I'm curious, with the projects that you guys looked at, these would all have qualified as Canadian productions based on the point count. Okay, so the crew is Canadian, the producers are Canadian. But in terms of the stories, which ones have a Canadian perspective and which ones don't?
I would say the Polar Sea definitely because it's from like northern North America, and not so much anything else except for the Songbird. That's about it. Those two is what I'm grasping. If I people might say that people might say different, but
yeah. What do you guys think?
And also living downstream is what Keegan said before, because people who are affected by that in southern Ontario is Canadian too, I guess.
Yeah. So what I did with Living Downstream, so it tells a story about an American biologist. It was mostly shot in the States, but I did tell 2 Canadian stories. So you follow this biologist around, and then there's these different experts who talk about evidence. So I had 2 experts, one from the University of Montreal and one from UBC, who were talking about some of their work to try to get some Canadian content in. It did not work. I did not get a Canadian broadcaster.
Oh, damn.
This one has none except, remember how I talked about the point of view of your project? So there is a point of view of your project, but then there's also kind of a type of documentary called point of view documentaries, which mean the filmmaker's point of view. Maybe the filmmaker does narration. Maybe it's just that they communicate something about what they think or what they feel about the project through the way they put the film together. That's a kind of documentary. So this is a point of view documentary. It has narration from the filmmaker, and it's really about her following these 4 guys on this road trip. So that's the Canadian content because the filmmaker's Canadian. That's the tricky way. That's the tricky way to do it. But it's actually nice, and it often makes for a beautiful film. Yeah, and then the Polar Sea goes through Canada. The main characters are not Canadian; they're Scandinavian, but it tells a story of our Arctic. And then Songbird SOS tells stories all over North America and maybe also in Europe about different songbird declines and why. And so there are Canadian experts and Canadian birds. And it was fun.
See, I will find experts.
Yeah, find experts.
Or the Canadian birds tell.
Canadian birds, I don't know if they can. Blue jays.
That would be awesome.
Canaries. Yep. Okay, so I just explained that. Let me get myself here. So that's the basic overview of funding. We go into a lot more detail with the webinars. The life cycle of production is what we're going to talk about now. So these are the stages of producing a documentary. You guys familiar with the stages? Development, pre-production, production, post-production, launch, and distribution. I think their names pretty clearly kind of outline what they are. And then this development is, what I've done is I've just listed kind of the things that as a producer you're responsible for at that stage. So development is usually before you have any money for your project. You might try to raise some money for development, but you're coming up with an idea, you're doing the research. If it's based on a book, then you're getting the rights to use it. If it's someone else's idea that they've brought to you, you're getting the rights to use that idea. You're writing the proposal, you're honing the pitch, you're doing the one sheet, and then you're starting to talk to funders with all that stuff. And you also start budgeting because you need to know how much it's going to cost in order to raise the money. You do some scheduling to figure out when you're going to shoot. Your financing plan is just a little Excel spreadsheet that says where you're getting the money from. And then legal and administrative setup is like if you're going to set up a production company and starting to contract people and things like that. There's a lot to do in development. A lot of like little boxes to tick. I have some handouts that we'll give you at the end, and there's one that goes into the pitch package. So like you've seen a one sheet, but what else is involved? There's a treatment. Remember I talked about Brian Grazer saying you have like one sentence to describe what your film is. That's called a log line. So it's like one very clear sentence that really encapsulates what the film's about, and that's one of the first things you get.
And another name for that is a tagline too.
Yeah, tagline is a little bit different because it's more of a marketing thing. So like a tagline would be used on a poster. It would be something very short and quippy that kind of it makes you want to learn more. It's like, oh, that's kind of intriguing, right?
Like the Bay Street posters for the film festival and the film festival when it happens.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, something just kind of like a little short quippy thing. A log line is a little bit longer that tries to explain the story a little bit, but they're very similar. So I have one of those handouts that will give you an idea of some of the things that you need to do. In pre-production, pre-production is before production, you're planning. And you're going to hire your crew, you're going to plan your shoots, book equipment and travel and locations, and talent if you have any, or on-camera subjects. You create the shooting script. This would be your director would create a shooting script, maybe not, maybe they just kind of have it in their head. And then you get production insurance, which is really important.
Insurance is always good.
Insurance is very important, yes.
Life insurance, car insurance, death insurance, everything.
And then production is shooting. So you are managing the crew. Sometimes you're on location as the producer. Sometimes you're not. You're tracking and paying the expenses. You're keeping the cash flowing, which is a very important part of the producer. And then you're troubleshooting as problems arise. And at this stage, you're like backup for the director. You're really helping them out, helping them with the logistic things, or having your team help with logistics. One thing I should mention that's pretty important is releases. Do you guys know what filming releases are? It's like a piece of paper that someone signs that says that they agree to let you use their image, their name, their voice in the film. And that's important because you need to prove that people are okay to be on camera. Similarly, if you're filming in a public place, you need to get a release from the owner to say that it's okay for you to film there. Some people, if you're using signs, you have to get releases for that. Definitely if you're using music, if you're using archival footage, all of that stuff needs to have permission. Yeah, it's a horrible thing. I mean, it's good because I don't want to use someone else's material without permission. I don't want someone to be in my film who doesn't want to be in my film either, unless they're doing something crooked. You know, like if it's an investigative thing, there's slightly different rules. But it can be hard to track down. In the film that I'm currently working on, we've had to take a break because now I have to go and get permissions from people to use little bits of things that happen to be in the film that we didn't get permission for at the time. And one thing that my editor did was he put in a little 20-second clip of audio to explain something that's happening from a news source, and it cost $4,000. Oh my God! And I said, well, I don't have $4,000 for this little clip of audio. And you know, I could actually probably just get someone to record something similar and put it in as if it was a news story. And you, as a documentary filmmaker, there are these ethics, right? Is that okay? Is that not okay? For my film, I think it's not okay. So I have to find it elsewhere, but I do have a researcher working for me who's found material that's absolutely free. So obviously I'll use that. But those are the things that you kind of have to think about and plan for as you're going along. And then post-production is really about keeping things going, keeping things moving. You keep track of the editor and the director's progress during the edit. You watch the cuts and offer feedback. You work with funders because a lot of the funders will also need to see cuts and provide feedback. And there are a few different stages to the editing. So there's an assembly stage where the editor is putting everything together. Then there's a rough cut, which is like your first kind of rough, watchable version of the film. Then there's a fine cut, which is like almost done but not quite. And then there's your locked cut, which means it's done and now it's going to have the sound cleaned up and all of that kind of stuff. So those are the different stages. You hire your team and you coordinate them. So these are the people who are usually involved in the post-production of the documentary. Obviously the director as well, but the picture editor, the sound editor, the mixer, the online editor, colorist, and archival researchers, potentially. Is there any names there that you don't know that you want me to tell you what they do?
I know everything about them. That's the thing.
You know everything about them?
Yeah,
Good.
in art classes, like this is what we learned in art class. I'm like, why are we learning about post production in art class?
Well, it's good because you want to
It's
make movies
weird.
now.
Promotion or
The colorist stuff is what I was saying about.
Promotion and marketing. So that happens after the film is done. When there's no money, yeah, so that's something, right? There are certain line items in your budget where you're not allowed to spend more than a certain percentage. And marketing is one of those where funders don't want you spending too much money on promoting the film because you're supposed to be using the budget to make the film. But in fact, it doesn't really matter how much money you put in the budget to promote it because by the time you get there, you will have nothing left. You will have spent it somewhere else. So promotion is a real problem. I think with documentaries, it's interesting because often they're about something that people can relate to, an issue or a person. So with regular films, you're often trying to get your films reviewed, like by the reviewer of the Toronto Star or whoever the kind of big reviewers are. With documentaries, there are a lot of other kinds of journalists who might be interested in your film. Who aren't film reviewers. They're not going to say like your film is worth 4 stars. But what they are going to do is talk about the issue. So for my film, Living Downstream, the one about cancer, I got about 50 different articles written about the film. And most of those were, like a columnist at the Toronto Star who was interested in environmental issues, a feminist magazine who was interested in cancer. So you find those, it's the same with your audience, right? The niche, you find the niches. And what I've heard, and I don't really know if this is true or not, is that journalists are inundated with press releases and with publicists. So sometimes the best way to get their attention is to just be the filmmaker. and to go to them with your project, rather than hiring someone to write a press release and try to get their attention, because they're a little bit blind to that. I don't know if that's true or not, and I think definitely working with a publicist can help, and they can chase people for you. As a filmmaker, you might not have the time to do that, but there is something about the personal touch that I think is useful, and again, finding those people who might be interested in your film, who aren't necessarily going to be looking for just films generally, and then that way too, with reviews, you have to get the reviewer to review it like as soon as it comes out, the first big screening. You need publicity for that. But with these other kinds of people, other kinds of journalists, you can go to them later on at different stages of the project. So, and when, I said publicity is after you're done, but actually you could be starting earlier, and often filmmakers will announce when they're starting to work on a project to start buzz up even at that early stage. And one of the advantages of doing something like a crowdfunding campaign instead of passing the hat is that you create the buzz for your project so that when it's ready, you have all these people who are already interested in seeing it. So errors and omissions is a kind of insurance that you need. It's different from your production insurance, and you need it if your project is going to go on television, because the broadcasters do not want to get sued because you didn't clear a piece of music or you didn't get that guy to sign a release. So they make you get insurance, and the insurance company will check to see that you have all those releases, and then they'll say, okay, if anyone sues you, you're insured for that. Okay? You're still tracking and paying costs and expenses. You're still troubleshooting, and then when all the editing and everything is done, you're going to prep your film for delivery, which means sending it off to all the people who funded it, and also sending them a lot of paperwork. Although now it's all digital, so it's not actually paper anymore, but it is a lot of putting together stuff for people. And then launch and distribution. So you will do festival submissions. There's a tool called Without a Box, which is a website. You put your film information in there once, and then you can submit to as many festivals as you want. Without a Box functions in North America more. They don't have that many European film festivals. Yeah.
There's also a Film Freeway too as well.
Sorry, say that
Film
again?
Freeway?
Yeah.
Film
And it's
Freeway?
Canadian, and we use it.
There you
Yeah. It's a lot better than Without a Box.
Okay, there you go.
Are Sundance also a film thing? Like for for dropping up your film and stuff?
Well, Sundance is a film festival.
Oh.
Yeah, and the submission deadline is September 29th. And that's like the pinnacle. Like that's like the best film festival. Like that's where everyone wants to get their film all the time. But there are a lot of other film festivals too. As I said, there's like 3,000, and I think that might I guess it's 3,000 worldwide. I was going to say North America, but that could be possible.
I think there's like 350 in Toronto alone.
Well, there's like 5 at any one time.
There is. There's like one every day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But it's nice because it means, no matter what your film is, as long as it's good, you should be able to get it in front of an audience.
And there's, there are film festivals for specific areas, like environmental.
Yes, environmental, LGBT, women's, like everything. That's another way, right? Is that Sundance isn't niche like that. They're just looking for the splashiest thing. But you have all these other festivals that are looking for something specific, and there's someone looking for your film. I guarantee it.
I noticed that the European festivals are much cheaper to enter than North American. Right?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, $10 to a festival.
Yeah, there is Telefilm, which is the Canadian Canadian Film Funder, the public funder. They have a program where they will submit your film to certain film festivals at no cost to you. So you usually have to get it in before the regular deadline. So Sundance's deadline is the 29th. If you want to submit it to Telefilm, you have to do it sometime in August. But you send it to them, and then they send it off, or sometimes they even bring the programmers in to watch the film in like Telefilm's theater, and that's of no cost to you. So, but that's only for select film festivals, but that is an option. Another thing that is an option is to contact the film festival, tell them about your project, and ask them if they'd like to see it. If they say yes, then often they will waive the submission fee, because you can spend thousands of dollars submitting to film festivals. And again, that's going to be the second webinar, and Julian Carrington is the festival concierge, and he's the expert in that, so he'll give you lots of tips and tricks that I can't. So publicity, marketing, and outreach is something you have to do. And you can do it at different stages. So for your festival screenings, your theatrical release, and your broadcast premiere, publicity and marketing, I think, is fairly clear. Outreach is a little bit more grassroots. Often documentary filmmakers do it themselves. But you're kind of like digging into your audience in a deeper way, hopefully, and getting them kind of keen on your film. And then you have kind of the distribution that happens afterwards. So it can go to all these places. And here's a little kind of flow chart of how it usually happens. So there is a process for, first you go to festivals, then to theaters, then non-theatrical, which is like community screenings, premium VOD, electronic sales, cable network TV, and then educational distribution. That's how it works typically. You skip stages too, depending on what your film is. These are some of the film festivals around.
You don't have us on there.
Because you're a festival, not a stival.
Yeah, exactly.
These are the big ones that everyone talks about, but you know, like I said, they don't reach communities in the same way as local film festivals, in my opinion. And then there's digital convergence. I don't know if you have enough time to talk about it, but I'll give you a quick overview. Do you guys know about there are these rules for funding for digital media? Do you know anything about this? So the Canadian government decided that it wanted to be very forward-thinking, and digital media was kind of the future. So internet, web-based stuff, games, 360, all of that. And so what they did is that the funding bodies, like the Canada Media Fund, said that if you're doing a project, you have to have a web portion of it as well, a digital media portion. So it wasn't enough to produce the documentary. If you were getting money from this body, you had to have something web-based. And it couldn't just be like a website promoting your film. It had to have significant meaning beyond just a promotional site. So it had to give a user an experience. And so now Canadian documentaries just have to do that if they're getting money from there. So now producers are thinking more about the creative ways that they might take their film to the next level and create a web portion for it. And these films all do have web portions. So a few people were talking about the Polar Sea 360 because it's here. So does someone want to talk about it a little bit? I haven't seen it, so I can't really do it justice. But yeah, I mean, it's.
I mean, I can just say,
yeah,
just to remind everybody, if you haven't had a chance, we'll have the 360 VR booth downstairs in the embassy, and you get to watch the trailer for Polar Sea 360, and you'll get a chance to check it out. But also, one of the people that worked on it, Scott Herman, is in the air right now, and he will be here. And at 8 p.m., he's going to do a little kind of TED Talks presentation at the Shag. So, but from 6 o'clock on, you'll be able to go and watch the trailer, and it's really quite amazing. And we have the little cardboards too.
I recommend watching the 360 because for me, I'm just so amazed with 360. I'm just encouraging everyone to try it out because it is freaky but exciting at the same time.
Did you get a brain freeze from that polar ice thing?
Yeah.
I probably would be like, oh my god, my head's stuck. Someone get it off my head.
Does everyone know what a 360 is?
Oh my. Don't tell me. Okay, I'm just waking up here like.
Well, the guy who actually worked on it can describe it better than me. But basically, they have a whole bunch of cameras around here shooting all at the same time. So then, when you've got the VR set on, you can look around and you can see the whole of the, wherever they were filming. You can look around and see things.
Which is everything. You're filming 360 degrees, like globally, so you can look down and you can look up and all around.
Like real.
Yeah, yeah, we live it.
I think there's like a bear hunt and everything in the actual thing, so it's pretty neat. Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah, please.
I've never ever seen VR before. Does it look realistic, like 3D, or like is it fisheye view or what?
I'm not an expert.
We come down after this.
You can
I
see
mean,
it.
after you can put on the headset and you can also check it on your phone. We've got some little cardboard headsets, and yeah, you really just have to try it to see it. But and we also shot our own 360. That was what our workshop was all about. So we went around filming around Thunder Bay, so you can see some 360, and it's magnified, so you really feel like you're right there. In fact, you see everything, but you're anyway, it's really cool.
And then the other projects had, like, I would say, very nice web-based things, but like less impressive than that. That's kind of like the gold standard. But you know, the messenger, the songbirds SOS follows a bird around, and you often have these. You know, sometimes filmmakers even make games that somehow are linked to their projects. So there's mine was more kind of like a Facebook-like site where you could go and kind of connect with other activists and learn about what's happening in your community. And Starman is really kind of pitched as like a trip through the universe, but using a lot of interviews from the experts talking about different things, different issues in astronomy, and kind of connecting dots in a more educational way for people. So there's different things that you can do, and you know that thing about kill your darlings. A lot of your darlings can end up somewhere like on your website afterwards, you know. So if you have a wonderful thing that you really love but doesn't have a place in your film, you can find a different place for it. And in fact, there's 2 characters in the film that I'm currently working on that I just had to take out totally from the movie. And these are like people who maybe spent like 2 weeks with me as I was filming. And it's like crushing for me, and it's going to hurt their feelings. But my plan is to make short films about them. So hopefully that it will make me feel better. I don't know if it's going to make them feel better at all, but I'll try.
Or you just call it deleted scenes.
Yeah, you can put it on the DVD as deleted scenes. Yeah, people aren't doing DVDs as much.
Or Blu-ray.
Blu-ray, yeah. So this was an exercise that we do not have time for. I was going to have you imagine what the digital media components of these different projects would be, and then I was going to actually tell you what they were. We just skipped ahead and I told you. And that's pretty much it. So I think the key takeaways from the session that I'd like you to kind of keep in your mind is how to tell your story in a compelling way, the different steps that a producer has to go through, and also knowing who your audience is and having an idea of how they're going to be watching it, so you can kind of make that plan. Those are, I think, the key kind of pieces. Are there any? We've got 8 minutes, so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Let's focus on this like trends, I guess, and this digital convergence.
Yeah.
Thinking about like linear and non-linear documentaries, and just the web platform, and thinking about clips of things and how either like the gaming, but like just how to take what is traditionally a linear model of storytelling and how that's being changed with the interface of the web. Can you speak more about the sorts of ups and downs of that, maybe? Or?
Yeah, so well, I can talk about, so the National Film Board is a real leader in interactive and non-linear docs. Has anyone ever seen a non-linear doc, even know what it is? Okay, so it's basically you go on a website, and it's almost like a choose your own adventure. You navigate through different clips in a different way. Yeah, so the NFB has a lot. You can go to nfb.ca, you can navigate through and you can find them. So they did one called High Rise that is about communities that live in like skyscraper kind of buildings. And so you spend time kind of looking in the different windows of the building and seeing the different lives of people in no particular order. And that's why it's called nonlinear, because a traditional film is like you watch it in one way. But with these web docs, you choose how you want to watch it. There's another one called Bear. I don't remember, it's like 62 or 59 or something like that, which is the story of a bear in one of the national or provincial parks out west. And that kind of shows you a map, and it tells you the story of the journey of the bear like over the course of a day. And this park was set up with all these different security cameras almost, and so you can click on different security cams and see the bear kind of moving through the park. And that's there's very little story there. It's just kind of watching this bear, but you get clips about wildlife management and kind of things peppered through. There was another one called Here at Home that the NFB did. It was about a specific project for helping homeless people become rehoused. And I believe that they filmed in Toronto and Montreal, and they filmed with homeless men and women, and then they also filmed with different kinds of support workers. And that rolled out over a period of time. So it was like maybe 6 months, and a couple clips would come up every week, so you could kind of follow the journey. But again, it wasn't organized in any kind of a way. So if you watched it over the course of time, you could kind of get a story. But if you watched it all at the end, you just make your own story and kind of connect the dots between people. And actually, one of my favorite kinds of films is and I've never been able to figure out how to do it with a doc, but the idea of you're following all these different people, and then at the end they come together in a surprising way. That's kind of a silly trope, but I love it, right? Like, oh, that's a weird guy, and that's a weird guy. Like Modern Family did it in their first episode. You follow all these different families, and then at the end you see, oh, they're actually one family, right? At the end of the first episode. So that Here at Home was kind of like that, where you see these different people, and then you might see a scene where they interact, and you realize, oh, this is the support worker for that guy. And so it's a bit of a journey. You're telling your own story in your own head, and they're providing the elements to do that, which I find really interesting. So there are different, and that's a very kind of creative approach. There aren't a lot of people who are supporting that work. The NFB is really the place to go at this stage. But there's some very interesting work being done too.
The other thing about the NFB is interesting is that, which I pitched them a couple of times, is that going to them, I remember saying to them, what are you looking for? And they said, pretty much everything, which is not the norm for a broadcaster. If you go to a broadcaster, they're going to just say, this is what we're looking for. We're not looking for this at all, right? And so they're just a little bit broader, and which is kind of interesting and good.
They're interested in definitely pushing creative boundaries. Their mandate is reflecting Canada to Canadians. So they are interested in Canadian stories more than international stories. But the Canadian filmmaker's perspective, how I talked about, well, it was her point of view as the filmmaker, so that was Canadian enough in that case. That could be a situation with the NFB. And they are interested in shorts. They've also got all these partnerships with different newspapers. I believe it's The Guardian and also the New York Times to do short web docs. So they're always interested in looking for short content that can be quickly done. And the way that they work, they're not a funder the way we talked about the other funders. They're Canada's national producer. So they could either co-produce with you, so you're the producer, and then they produce with you, and they'll give you 49% of your budget for that relationship. Or if you're the director and they like your project, they'll go, okay, we will fund it 100%, and you will work for us and direct the project. So those are the two ways that you can work with the NFB. But they're a really great shop to get involved with for sure. Any other questions? Oh, I don't think we have any time. But I can also just stand in the hallway if you guys want to talk to me. If you're not in the next section.
I think what we're gonna do is, Frederick, if you don't mind, I think we should have a 15-minute break before your session starts, and we can all stretch our legs and chat and
Do some yoga.
do some yoga. And so I just want to say thank you so much for coming, Chanda, and
If you want to ask me questions, I'm happy to help.
yeah, and also we really want to thank Doc
and Doc Institute for providing this opportunity for us. And, yeah, wonderful. Okay, so let's have a
It's great.
come back with your film.
I will. Yes, next year.
Okay, wonderful. Let's have a break.
Oh, good.
Yes, sorry, that was good. Right?
And also, is there
Yes,
you should go get what's it is.
Yes, I do, and I would like a snack.
Did you want to fight for a snack?
Timing,
I just gotta get out of here for 5 minutes. Yeah, let's go over to Calico for a bit. I just gotta stop this.
You can't do that without something to rip your head off. How? You look like you're like this?
We had, yeah, it's a from January to the end of April. And
Oh, help it is
because,
from.
my,
So it's just like
yes, it's
a